implication of providing supports for nonprofits. In a report published in November 2011, entitled "A Property Tax Exemption for Nonprofit and Revenue" by the Lincoln Institute, the report strongly suggests that town explore the use of usage fee for services provided to nonprofits to offset certain costs. The committee has also discussed more creative ideas, such as establishing a foundation where nonprofit could offer support for certain aspects of Milton operation. This approach might allow more flexibility in seeking contributions and could enable the town to offer incentive for certain level of participation, such as naming right for specific town facilities, as the Curry Fire Station. We have a fire station on 138 that's very dilapidated, that's right in Curry's backyard. So potential synergy in working with Curry to effectuate a reconstruction of that station might be an area for the town, for the board to look at. In conclusion, the pilot committee members believe that Milton nonprofits are quite healthy and are likely to grow and place an even larger burden on the remaining taxpayers. There is no simple solution for this problem. A well-implemented pilot program can be a good first step for the pilot committee members that we suggest, and more comprehensive study may be conducted by the town. But based on what other communities are doing, based on our lack of other sources for revenue, based on our restriction with regard to property taxes and Prop 2.5, we strongly encourage an effective pilot program, and we encourage the Board of Selectmen to our town administrator to administer such a program.
Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Sure. First, I want to commend you on putting this report together. I think that the pilot program is much needed here in town, and I think that it would create some opportunity, you know, for a number of, you know, projects that the town's working on. I think that during a lot of your investigations and stuff, did you come up with an assessment from the nonprofits, whether it be Curry, Milton Academy, the hospital, on what they're currently doing? Any in-kind? Did you come up with a list of that? Because I'd be curious to know what they're currently doing, because I think that to make pilots truly work, I think having a good partnership with each, whether it be hospital, school, to get together and kind of work together to say, hey, look, you know, we want to make this work for the town and for the nonprofit. Has there been a list created on what they're currently doing for the town?
Under our charter, we were restricted from directly interacting
Okay.
with those organizations. From data that's available, there are limited pilot contributions that have been made to the town. Those contributions are far below the value of the assets and the 25% recommendation of.
Right. Yeah, I'm aware of those, but I'm curious because I know that say Milton Academy may give fields, you know, to some of the baseball organizations, and you know, I'm just curious that you know, when we do get involved in this, that we really get a good assessment of what each place is actually doing, and then where we see a good fit to help, you know, our town and residents.
In Boston, they do have a report within the guidelines promoted by the City of Boston as to what each nonprofit organization is contributing in cash, in kind.
In kind, yeah.
Not in cash. And it has to meet certain requirements. And I think that we would want to institute that to get, you know, a clear picture of what they're doing, because Boston allows whatever the contribution is for that particular year, they can make half of that in kind and half in cash.
I'm familiar with Boston, and that's why I was asking about that, because I think that that's a good avenue. You know, and I think that a lot of it's based on relationships and sharing information, so I think that it'd be a good start.
I guess the one question I have, and just kind of jumping on that thought, is, you know, that quid pro quo, you know, of in-kind services. Does Boston have a way of valuing, because it becomes difficult, you know, what is the value of using a baseball field for?
Well, they do have usage charges that they have. So, for instance, you know, if it was an athletic facility, and not all of this is athletics, I mean, it could be scholarships. For
Right,
instance,
yeah. I mean,
matter of
a lot of
fact,
things.
I was on the Joe Moakley Scholarship at Northeastern, and that was one of the things that Northeastern University did for the city of Boston, was provide certain scholarships for people that qualified. So, I mean, those things could happen. That could happen with Curry. But they do have, you know, athletic fees. So, for instance, it could be a out of town or out of town fee, and then they can apply that. Okay, a non, you know, a non, I don't know, user fee. You know, typical user fee. So
But the city does have a way of
they do have a way of calculating
Yeah,
that.
they have specific guidelines. They have to submit a report showing how they're calculating it, and it has to meet the criteria that Boston
that has been
set up.
established.
Yes.
Okay.
I think part of the thing that we presented in our first presentation was the need for the town to develop such a matrix to evaluate services that are offered by the nonprofits. In the case of Boston, where most of the major institutions offer scholarships, for example, to Boston Scholars, BU offers a string of scholarship to Boston Public School kids. Northeastern does the same, and so on. The actual cash value of that scholarship goes towards
Right, and that-
part of their contribution.
That's pretty simple to value, yeah.
In the case where there are services that are being offered, there are matrices that are used to calculate the value of that service.
Okay.
If, for example, a healthcare facility put on a health fair, there's a value to the community for that health fair. There is a cost associated with putting on that health fair. So a pro rata share of the cost associated with that fair may go towards that pilot contribution. So the town administrator, or in the case of Boston, the city gets together in some cases after these organizations fill out the form and say this is worth X, and negotiate whether or not it is worth X or if it's worth X minus N.
Okay. Second question I have, yeah, unlike a Boston where there are many nonprofits that would meet that metric of you know, in the case of Milton, we're really talking 3.
3, yes.
So if one doesn't get on board, then the other 2 may not get, you know, I mean, is it more difficult because we're only dealing with such a small number of you know, granted, they have quite a bit of property, and I definitely agree with you that if you even value them at 25%, you know, it would be some significant revenue. You know, I guess my question or concern is where, unlike Boston, where there are so many, if you don't get, you know, a few of them to sign up, you still got a large number. Here we don't.
Yeah,
Well,
but I would think, you know, you look at Boston, they just issued their report in July, and they raised $28 million in cash payments, pilot payments. They're in the 4th year of their phased-in program. And, for example, Beth Israel Deaconess in Boston contributed $2.5 million in cash. So they're doing it in Boston, and Peter Healy was on the board for a period of time. I think we have a good starting point there and say, you know, if you're doing it in Boston, why not Milton? We are providing those support services.
Sure.
And I think if we can get one on board, it'll start the process, because they are consuming services, and the fact of the matter is, whatever they're not paying is absorbed by or covered by the residential taxpayer.
Sure.
And that number can be 10 to 15% of your tax bill is covering what if they were fully taxable entities, 10 to 15% of your tax bill represents what they're not paying. So that's a pretty significant number and has an impact on every homeowner in Milton. So, and they're a stakeholder. I'm not trying to make them out to be, the bad guys here, because by law, they don't have to pay. But I think they're stakeholders in the town, and I think they should be part of this process. And that's what I'd like to see. The next phase of this is, whether it's the town administrator, reaching out to start that process to see if we can put something together.
I was going to ask about Peter, because in your list of the members, you don't list him, but Peter Healy is the CEO of BID Milton.
Yes.
He was a member of the committee. Did he step down from the committee?
As we got further into putting together a policy, because of lack of participation from other nonprofit, Peter's position was that he didn't want to be on both sides of the equation, and it was simpler for him to step aside from the pilot committee and wait for the committee to put forth a policy and for the Board of Selectmen to adopt that policy and for the town to move forward with that policy before BID Milton would re-engage to determine what their contribution, if any, was going to be to the town.
Okay. I wasn't aware that he had stepped down, but I was glad that he participated, at least in the initial stages.
Yeah, I too would like to see us get involved now. I think that I think it is important to work with all of these groups and to articulate all the good that they are doing, because I think that that's number one, that they are doing a lot of good for our town, and a lot of times you just don't realize it. It just isn't out there. So an assessment would be great, and then to find ways to work together to provide educational, athletic, and health opportunities for the town in lieu of taxes. I think it's important that we all work together to, I think it's great for everyone. I think it's a win-win for both, whether it be a school or a hospital and the community to work together, and I think that it will benefit the tax base at the end of the day.
I agree. I agree. I mean, I'd like to commend the committee also. I mean, I think you've made great strides in terms of coming up with those policy ideas, and I mean, there's certainly enough here to formulate a policy. I'm a little interested in, you mentioned user fees and how something like that might work. I mean, clearly, you can't charge a user fee for police. You can't charge a user fee for fire, I wouldn't think. So what's left?
I think we saw those maybe in some other states that they were doing that, exploring that with some of the universities.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree, I don't think I've seen it here in Massachusetts
Yeah, I
implemented.
couldn't imagine how it would work. But you know, that aside, I think there are a lot of great ideas in here, and I think we are ready to go to the next step. It's just a matter of formulating that policy, and you know, I would hope the committee could kind of.
We have a draft of the policy.
Oh.
They've given us that.
Okay.
So,
So-
and I think it is a good draft. I did have another question.
Sure, go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt, but if we,
No, go ahead.
just while we're doing questions. The last time you were in, Dimitri and Jim, which several months ago now, might even have been last year, at that point, there was some talk about, is it just the largest three institutions, or is it a wider group also of some intermediate group of nonprofits? Now, the last guideline you have here on page 4 is that you're recommending that there be an exception for any nonprofit that owns land valued at less than $10 million.
Correct.
So obviously, you've had some more discussion on that. Could you give us a little bit
Sure.
about what your thoughts were?
One of the things that we did early on was to identify the nonprofits in the community and to identify the size of those nonprofits. When we did the initial data gathering, what we did was to group the nonprofits into 3 categories. Those nonprofits that had $5 million or less in property values, those that were between 5 and 15, and those that were greater than 15 million. What we found was that the majority of the nonprofits in town were far smaller, and they were in that 0 to 5 million range. We had 4 organizations that were in that $5 to $20 million range. Those organizations were Boston Council for Boy Scouts, which were valued at $12.6 million based on the last set of data that we had. Congregation of Sisters of St. Joseph, Fontbonne, which was at $12.1 million, Cunningham, $7 million, and La Brea at $6 million. We had 4 organizations in town that were at or greater than $15 million in valuation. Milton Academy was about $106 million in valuation. Curry College was at 90, and that's prior to a lot of that new construction. Milton Hospital was at 76 million, and the Roman Archdiocese was at 23.7 million. And of the 23.7 million, they were paying taxes and full million of that number. So when we looked at that group, because of the amount of work that was going to be involved in getting everyone engaged and to participate, the choice was to sort of like go after the big guys first. Set a high watermark or low watermark, if you would, and say, okay, let's identify everybody over $10 million and let's get those guys involved. Once we get those guys involved, we can go back and lower that number to get more people involved once we had a process that was very well defined. We wanted to make sure that because of limitation in terms of resources that's available to the town, that we focus our energy in going after some of the bigger fish in the pool, so to speak.
And I think that does make sense. I think it's clearly that's where the larger dollars are gonna be anyway, so. And I do like the idea of, like you said, lowering that bar as time goes on.
We're completing the FY16 revaluation, and I know these numbers are going to change significantly, especially with what's going on at Curry with the recent building. So those numbers, I think, are going to, gravitate a little higher in valuation.
Sure. So I guess the next step is the adoption of the policy and then the formulation of a plan as to how to implement that policy, which I think is going to be the challenge,
Yes.
so to say. Given the fact that we have such limited resources in terms of employees in the town, and they're stretched so thin to begin with, where we start, but it's certainly worth looking, it's certainly worth formulating a plan for.
I think that looking at some best practices, from other communities that have succeeded in this are going to be helpful for us once we do adopt this policy.
Yeah, that's a good question. Are there, outside of Boston, are there any other Massachusetts communities, similar to us or even slightly larger than us, that have had a successful plan in place? Because we're not Boston, we don't have the resources that Boston has.
Did you look at that question about other towns?
There are several other towns that have implemented pilot policies, including Andover, and they have been successful in getting the organizations in their community to actively participate.
So that may be
Brookline also.
that may be worthwhile looking at, having town administrator reach out to an Andover or a Brookline, see how they've formulated their plan, see what their policy statement looks like as well. And, I like this as a policy statement, so it's just a matter of how to implement it, really. So,
Yeah, I think the committee did good work to propose this policy for us, so thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very
So
much.
what will we do, put this on a future agenda?
yes.
For
and-
discussion?
Yeah, and like all our other things, it's something we shouldn't wait too long on, and you don't want it to get too cold. And so it's,
Yeah, I agree. I think the sooner the better. I think they put some great work into this, and I think that, having Anne Marie start to look into some of these other towns that have had some successes, while also accumulating, some sort of a list of what is already occurring from within town from these places, because I know that some of these places have contributed, you know, in certain ways, and we, you know, I think ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to have a long-term, good partnership with them.
That's
and-
right.
And find ways where we do have gaps where they can help in lieu of taxes, you know?
Cash payments would be nice too, right?
Yeah.
You could use that for
Well,
the budget.
the- absolutely.
Yeah.
The,
But I
the,
think-
the Boston
This is a
motto
good
is
combination, too.
50% cash, 50% in kind.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, now shift back to item 8 on the agenda, which is a conference with Caroline Kinsella, Public Health Director, about the CAC, the new CAC update. Hey, Caroline.
Hi, Caroline.
Hi, everyone. How are you tonight? Good. So Caroline Kinsella, Health Director. I'm giving an update of the Massachusetts Port Authority Community Advisory Committee. So the Massachusetts Port Authority Community Advisory Committee has met just twice. On April 30th, we met and there was an overview of the legal requirements for the committee. The Massport Enabling Act provides the Massport $250,000 annually. The regular meetings will meet just quarterly, and all meetings are open to the public. It was voted to set aside $10,000 to draft bylaws, which they're in the process of doing right now. Our second meeting on June 25th, we did not have a quorum, not even close to a quorum, which was very disappointing. The meetings have not been productive so far, and the role of this committee still has not been defined. There's no missions or no goals have been set yet. So I just want to get you an update of where we are right now. Today, I just found out we have our next meeting October 1st. So they finally set our next meeting.
Hopefully there'll be a quorum at that one for you, right?
I hope so. So 30 have been appointed so far, and we're still waiting for 9 appointments at this time.
So 30 members have been appointed? but-
Yes,
And what is it, there's one from each community. Boston gets a bunch, so, right?
yes. We get like 5, I think.
Okay. It is kind of disappointing, but hopefully it will.
I hope there'll be a quorum the next time.
Mm.
So we'll see. And then I'll report back
Great,
when I get more information.
thank you.
Great.
Okay,
Thanks
Thank you
again.
very much.
Caroline.
Thanks.
Waited a long time to get.
Yes.
get
I know.
everything
Wait
done,
so long.
Thanks for staying.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks,
Thanks.
everyone.
Okay, now, item 10 on the agenda is a conference with Stan Janaga, Chair of the DPW Needs Assessment Committee. Hey, Stan.
Hi, Stan.
Stan?
I can do it for you, just let me know when.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Do I have to be recorded? Shall I sit here
It needs to be in the
Yeah,
microphone for
once you-
or
TV.
the microphone?
Yeah, so just grab one of those, you can bring it up with you, I
Bring it
think.
right up.
How's that? Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Great. This is the report. I promise at this late hour, I don't plan on briefing all of this report to you. I've got a kind of a summary brief that hits the bottom lines and then some key points that I hope you'll take away from the study. I know you've gotten a copy of this within the last few days. I'm not sure exactly when, but in the last few days.
Yes.
Thanks for the opportunity for us to report. Joe, next slide, please. May 2014 town meeting established the study, funded $35,000. The issue was to determine the spatial needs of 4 departments, DPW, Consolidated Facilities, Parks and Rec, and Cemetery. Cemetery opted out, and the board did that. I talked at the time to the town moderator, and Katie then was then chair of the Board of Selectmen. The operation of the cemetery is dramatically different than the other 3 departments. The other 3 departments hit every part of town, west one day, east the next day, and in between that next afternoon. Cemetery operates within the confines. If you were to have cemetery employees, for example, report to the DPW yard, and pick up their equipment there, load a trailer, move it over to the cemetery, do their work, odds are you'd lose 30 to 60 minutes of work every day, which, would be significant and unproductive and frankly silly, I guess might be the right word. So we're talking about really the spatial needs of the three departments. Joe? Here's the folks on the committee. Marie Theodat is with us today, also the committee member. And we had assistance from the three staff from the three departments. Tom McCarthy from the commission, from the Parks Commission. All three of those folks were very helpful to us and very helpful to the consultant. Next, please. Okay, I call your attention to two numbers on this. Don't worry about the detail unless you'd like to look at it, but two numbers. Here's what we've got, 37,000 square feet. Here's what industry standards say we should have. Those industry standards, again, we're at approximately 50% of the industry standard, and it's impossible to compare towns because no two towns are exactly alike, with exactly the same equipment. But Weston and Sampson, our consultant, has worked on about 100 various municipal facilities across the Commonwealth over the years, and they looked at the last 5 to 10 years. And the fact is that 72,492 square feet is the low end of towns that we can call comparable to us. So it's not plush, it's not excessive by any stretch. Joe? Thank you. Here's what drives the need. Obviously, town meeting told us to do a spatial needs assessment, so we did that. But why are we worried about facilities at the DPW yard? They're grossly undersized, they're scattered. I was kind up there at the top when I said they're in marginal to very poor condition. I will tell you, the committee went through it, and to say, Marie, appalled, disappointed, sad, that's really what it is. Tom, I know you've been there.
I've been there.
Katie, I know we talked about it. Have you seen it also? Yeah, okay.
Not recently, but a few
Okay.
years ago.
I would just ask each of you, before you make any decision on what you're going to do about the DPW, and that's your purview, you've got to go see that place. In the interest of time, I didn't bring you any pictures, but also, I'll be honest with you, I think the pictures show it nicer than what it is. The place is horrible, and there's hardly anything about it that's halfway decent. ADA compliant, restrooms not compliant, we've got issues on public accessibility and safety, poor ventilation, inadequate lighting. You're talking a couple buildings built almost 100 years ago, several in the 1930s, so that's what would you expect in that, again, given those kinds of standards. We've got the union grievance, which we've started to address. Another big issue was the loss of 1,500 square feet of covered storage this last winter with the collapse of the structure, and the structure being deemed unsafe for personnel to use. Joe? Outdoor storage. I really want to stress that. A big piece of the required facilities versus the existing facilities is covered storage. Why do you want covered storage? Talk just a little bit about that. About 50% of the equipment owned by those three departments is stored outdoors. You know the harshness of the climate. There's little to talk about that. We experience it enough. The second issue is we have an old fleet. If you look at a truck life, a pickup truck or a simple stake and platform truck, the economic life of that truck is considered to be 10 years. We're replacing them at 15 to 20 years. That's a capital problem for the town, I understand that. But that's the reality. You've got old clunkers that are in those harsh weather conditions and not in decent storage. Heavy equipment life is considered to be about 15 years. Again, that varies depending on the usage, but we're replacing them in 20 to 25 years. So again, clunkers. That says Waltham dump truck example. I apologize, that's my error. It should be Wayland. There is a documented case in Wayland about the impact of outdoor storage on service life of equipment or trucks. Wayland bought 3 dump trucks and had storage for one of them inside. The crews kept the one stored inside all the time, the other 2 outside. Long story short, when they started having trouble with the dump trucks, they got rid of 2 dump trucks, the ones that were stored outside. Auction wouldn't accept them because they were in such bad shape, so they were sold for scrap. The one that was stored inside served 3 more years and was sold at auction with some return to the town. Now, you know, there's no precise formula which says you'll get 3 more years or 2 more years or 5, because it obviously depends on the usage and the, you know, how bad the winters in a row are going to be and those kinds of things. But the simple fact is, tires, hydraulic systems, steel all take one heck of a beating from being stored outdoors. Joe? Here's the criteria we issued to the consultant from the committee. They're going to stay on that site. That we thought was a given. We thought the safety issue was pretty important. You got to separate the facilities such that the public can come in there without fear of being run over by a big truck, which, again, is a concern to all of us. And then lastly, because we knew that this was going to be an expensive undertaking, utilize existing buildings as much as possible. Ideally, you'd like to start with a clean sheet of paper, you know, tuck it off in one little corner and all that, but given the realities of life, using existing buildings seemed like the only way to go, and we took the liberty of giving the consultant that guidance. Joe? We looked at 14 conceptual alternatives, and we selected what is labeled in your report, Scheme 3C. It's the last of those pullouts, as what we believe is the optimum alternative in many ways, because the price is the least and it maximizes the use of existing facilities. And I'll cover those facilities in a minute. Let's just go to the next slide, Joe. And this is the yard, and just a couple of highlights. When you see the X's here, that's the reuse of facilities. This gets reused for employee facilities. This is the existing garage that gets reused as admin space, and this is storage space that gets used, again, for storage and tied to the indoor storage of the major vehicles and pieces of equipment. You see the covered storage again, covered parking. We add a wash rack, which doesn't exist, and this one would be compliant with today's laws. Probably the other thing that stays is the fuel facility. That is compliant with today's rules on environmental laws and rules. So that, Joe, next?
Previous slide or the next one?
No, the next one, please, I'm sorry. We looked at, we don't know how any of this is going to come about, but we thought we had to look at least a couple of schemes so we could present something to you. Single contract takes 28 months to do what we showed you on that previous slide, and the price tag is $27 million. We looked at 3 separate contracts. It takes 52 months to do that. If you start this one at the end of this one and so on, it could take longer than that, obviously. If it takes longer, this number goes up without question. But you can see the difference between this and this just in timing and doing different phases. You've got to, even in this, you've got some phasing, because you've got to have the vehicle maintenance facility, new one, done, so you can close the old one out and make it into admin space, and you know, and so on as you go along. That's kind of it. The funding and decisions for this are out of my hands. My expectation is that we would be expected to brief town meeting, since town meeting charged us with doing that. Is that a correct assumption on your part? Mm-hmm. And I would seek some guidance from you, and it doesn't need to be right now, but maybe just afterwards as to how much detail I want to go into in town meeting. Is this enough detail, or would town meeting need to feel like they needed to have, have more detail than they did here? And we'd be happy to answer any questions for you. Joe Lynch is here, of course. Bill Ritchie's here, our advisors. And we've got Jeff Alberti from Weston & Sampson, who did the study and whose experience hits most of those 100 facilities across the Commonwealth.
I guess that's certainly enlightening in terms of the number. I mean, it's interesting. I almost got lynched at town meeting last year when I presented my plan to kind of smooth out the, kind of keep what we've been, our debt, what do you call it, the debt exclusion we have right now, kind of keep that going, bank it, and I was using, I think 50 million in my model. So, I mean, that 26 million kind of fits in when you figure the fire stations. I have no idea what they're gonna come in at, but I figure
Yeah.
something in that
It
range.
was good to use 50.
But like I said, I almost got lynched when I did it. But, yeah, and I think that model even was probably 4 or 5 years out before you'd even be able to tap that money to.
Well, the reality is that the longer this goes till we fix this problem, we've got older, crankier equipment, if you will, clunkier, crankier equipment, higher maintenance costs. We're not tracking that. It would take a great deal of effort to track that, but the reality is, I don't know, does anybody here own a 15-year-old pickup truck that they're driving around in? I don't think so. There's a reason for that now, that we're not doing that. We're paying a lot of money on the other side. And again, it would be difficult to track each dollar and cent, but the reality is it is costing us. The other way it's costing us is in the deterioration of that equipment and in response times. Instead of being able to pull equipment out, for example, with a water main break, pull it out of a garage and get over there and repair that water main, we might spend a half an hour cleaning snow off of it so that we can get a piece of equipment going and maybe get the diesel engine started because of the harsh temperatures and harsh conditions. That's a reality that the DPW faces every day in trying to do his job.
Yeah, I think you guys put together a great report. I read through it, and a few years back, I worked in the town of Westwood where they went through a total overhaul in their DPW facility, and it's paid incredible dividends. Having worked in government for a number of years, looking at efficiencies. Taxpayers often complain about not getting services. Well, when you see a number like this, you say, geez, how could we ever do that? Well, you're talking about long-term efficiencies, and you get better results when you invest in the future for something that is something that really is critical. I think I worked in Boston and I worked for Tom Menino, and we talked about basic city services. He had a big approval rate because people were happy that streets were clean. People were happy that snow removal was great. People were happy that trash was collected on time. Those are the things you pay taxes for. And so if you don't invest in the future with a good facility, with good equipment that can actually be maintained to save money long-term, then I think you're in trouble. So, this is excellent. Obviously, it's a huge number and one that we'll often deliberate, but I think it's a great start for a great discussion.
Thank you.
Stan, you raised a point that I hadn't really considered before, that part of our DPW facility is water and sewer enterprise. So I would assume part of that capital project would be a water and sewer capital project?
Yeah, into the microphone. I should pull this one aside. Yeah, as far as real estate and equipment assets, it's probably a little bit different than the actual operation, which is typically probably 30% water, 30% sewer, and 35% balance being the general public works, and then some miscellaneous work. Equipment assets in the actual facility footprint is probably closer to 20% water, 20% sewer, and so, which would be legitimately assigned as an indirect cost to the water and sewer enterprises. I think it's important to point out too that these.
I guess that's the question. Can it be would it be an indirect cost, or could it be a? And I guess that's a question for another day. Could it be a shared capital project, so that part of the debt is carried by the water and sewer enterprise
Debt
fund.
service is a direct cost. Yeah, debt service is direct cost.
Right,
if you're
so
talking
could you
specific-
bifurcate this project into two pieces, one being the water and sewer enterprise fund, and the other being general government? And the reason I'm saying that is just, then you're talking a smaller debt exclusion. Obviously, the effect to the taxpayer is the same. They either pay it through a water and sewer rate, or they pay it through a real estate tax, but certainly, it makes it a little easier to get your head around it and to move it through town meeting and everything.
There's one other issue that we talk about the equipment and the condition of the equipment. I have a hard time believing that this doesn't affect employee morale strongly.
Yeah.
And again, that won't get any better over time, and that's not a good thing for your point about the kind of services that we get.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can we go back, Joe, to the slide that shows the proposal? Yes. Stan, one of the things that we wanted the committee to, the big task for the committee, aside from the financial issues and what the cost of all this would be figure out what's the best layout for this site. And this is the proposal you've put forward. The materials you sent us have a number of other options. Could you just maybe speak a little bit about how you settled on this design rather than some of the other designs? What, in terms of where things are placed, efficiency at the yard, use by other departments, what led you to this design as opposed to the 7 or 8 or 10 other designs?
I think 14, really, 13 others,
Yeah.
I guess.
It's a big
13 others
number.
Besides this one. I'll make a couple of comments, and I'll ask Joe or Jeff to chime in after I'm done, just to
Okay.
make sure we completely answer your question. We tried to get a couple of things. Maximize the use of existing facilities. If we've got a decent structure, let's not redo that. That gives you some pluses, but it gives you some minuses, because again, if you started with a clean sheet of paper, it probably wouldn't be laid out quite this way. Then we looked at traffic flow, and we wanted a way for vehicles to come in, get right to indoor storage and parking here, and then be able to come out, fuel, and
see.
be able to do that. So that flow was important. This was an attempt to keep employee vehicles and public vehicles away from all of this, for safety reasons principally, safety of the public mostly. With that, again, I guess the reuse did constrain us. I might also point out that all the notion here is that a piece of this is landscaping to shield it from the abutters. And you all have heard many of the concerns and complaints of the abutters, valid concerns
Yes.
and complaints. So with that, Joe, Jeff, you want to add anything to what I just said?
Sure. Pull your chair over. Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head as far as the driving factor was looking at the value of the existing facilities and trying not to be wasteful. But we also understand the cliche that whenever you try to do a remodeling project versus new, sometimes it drives the cost up. So do we have a perfect circulation? Do we have a perfect campus layout, or as a single facility, or a larger, better positioned facility would be? No, there were better options with greater expense that were considered and ruled out. We also recognized, if you look at the sketch that's in front of you, that magenta purplish color, L-shaped building with the X in it, that one right there, Stan, thank you, is a building that, through prior capital plans, has addressed the union grievance issue, and we're about to sink $450,000 investment into rehabilitating that facility. In essence, it will be a rehabilitated new building soon, so it's got to be something we save. The next magenta building, the bigger X, that is the existing mechanics garage, central maintenance garage, if you will. It is highly inadequate for the existing, for example, the fire truck doesn't even fit in it to be maintained, but as well as confinement with operations of other equipment that we have. But it's a rock-solid building. It's a high building. Converting, taking that rock-solid masonry construction and given its height, introduce either a mezzanine or a second story into it and make it the office space for admin, for the DPW, the records retention area and consolidated facilities is a great use for that building. And it results in cost savings for not having to demolish it and replace it with new. The next building is the yellowish building with the X in it, that one there. That's a pre-engineered metal building now. It was built in the 70s. It's a high span, clear span building, pre-engineered metal building. The skin on it, like typical of those buildings in the class of use, it needs to be replaced, but structurally it's sound. It allows through flow of traffic. It's a good building. Otherwise, again, it would be somewhat wasteful to demolish it. So recognizing that at the committee level, and the committee giving the direction to the consultant, we looked at clean slate all the way down to this, in recognizing that, salvation of the buildings was something that seemed to be cost-effective and still met the flow of separating operational traffic from civilian traffic.
Just to add briefly on a couple of items, we do maintain a counterclockwise circulation pattern on the site for the large vehicles. These vehicles will have equipment in tow, so as they enter and exit out, it gives the driver who's on the left-hand side better visibility, so the circulation for the larger equipment was key. And you also notice that we've created a courtyard for where you will have some yard operations. And that courtyard, we use the buildings to actually shield that operation from the abutters and from the main roadway. So it's a nice function to use the building to act as a shield for some of those operations. And then in the bottom right-hand side, this is generally the area where you're going to have your occupied spaces, most of where all your staff is going to be reporting. And then the upper left portion of the lighter colored areas, that's where your vehicle and equipment is. So two distinct atmospheres with regard to storing equipment indoors and having people inside. And so this is a nice separation of those two environments and helps prevent any spreading of fumes between the buildings. So it's a nice feature as well.
And you're still contemplating the recycling area in the current location?
Correct.
But if you recognize the demolition of the buildings that are up there creates a landscape area, but it also creates greater footprint area for greater efficiency in how that recycle area works. And also, though we didn't get to the level of looking at it, it takes advantage, it has potential to take advantage of the terrain difference, the change in elevation, to perhaps do some gravity handling of materials where people can drop it street level and then push it into containers off the side. So, there are some advantages of using the land area that gets freed up by demolishing those buildings up there. But we would still keep it on site.
Yes. Thank you.
Great.
I think one thing I do want to underscore is this is a high-altitude, 30,000-foot master plan type of flyover. These numbers aren't precise. If we were to go to construction today, there's contingencies in there. So part of the phasing in the mindset that we should be looking at is, in the decision-making is, maybe the next step is to move in conceptual design development of the preferred alternative, come out and do some soils explorations, look at do some surveying, get some of the permitting and legal issues understood, and move it along that way. And as you do that, some of those contingencies numbers can be whittled down as it becomes more known of what you're dealing with. There's ways that you can even have pre-phase progress in the process. The report doesn't go into that kind of detail. It truly
Perhaps
is a
we
master
should
plan.
consider offering a proposal to you all to consider for putting forward to town meeting in May, funding. Obviously, I'm not trying to make a decision for you. I'd like to, but perhaps we should put the wording and price something that would make sense to move along, to get that greater detail and more certainty with regard to to everything we're talking about. Would that make sense?
I think it does, yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at least, like I said, the first step is, present, do what the committee was chartered to do and present the plan, but yeah, we should come up with some kind of a thought as to what's the next step and start, keep moving this thing forward.
Yeah, I think so. Stan, in answer to your question, I think the presentation that you've given us would be good to give at town meeting. I don't know that it wouldn't hurt maybe to add the photos, but as you said, if the photos really don't do justice to the situation,
I'll be honest with
maybe
you,
you're
they
better
don't-
off describing it.
They don't look bad enough to me. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I see it physically, and I don't know, the photographs to me kind of gloss it up. Maybe I need to go out there and take another look, Joe. We need to get a camera.
There's a certain aspect of the smell of rotting wood
Yeah.
that you don't pick up in a photograph.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think we owe thanks to the committee and also to Tom for his creative idea that went to town meeting in May, but for the benefit of the viewers who are watching and who may not know Stan, we have a great chairman for this committee, and Stan, he was retired general with the, if I get this wrong, Stan, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So when the moderator appointed this committee, our board made some recommendations, and Stan was our top choice, and we asked the moderator to consider appointing him as chair. And I think we made the right choice, because who better than a retired general to help decide what the logistics at this site should be. So Stan, to you, to Marie, who's here tonight, to all the other members of your committee, thank you very much for all of your work. And as one member of the board, I would like to thank our chair for putting forward the debt service article. I don't even know what the right way to describe this, Tom, the debt exclusion article that you put forward in May. That was a creative idea that Tom had, and sometimes, you know, we get a lot of rocks thrown at us that things aren't moving quickly enough or something's not working right. We've had lots of issues tonight that we're dealing with. This is one that's a long-term project, but thanks to Tom's creative financial idea and the hard work, Stan, of you and your committee, and with the help of Joe and his team, I think we're at the beginning stages of trying to move something along here that's long overdue and probably should have been addressed decades ago, but
Yeah.
we're at least on it. We're on it right now, and it's not going to be solved overnight, but we're taking the right steps to move it along, thanks to, I think, to both
Thank you.
your committee and to Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Stan.
Thank you, Stan.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 11 on the agenda is a conference with Ian Cook of the Neponset Watershed Association on a grant application.
Do we have any materials for this?
Hmm?
Materials?
Yeah, there are some.
I didn't see it earlier. Okay.
Hi, my name's Ian Cook. I'm the Executive Director of the Neponset River Watershed Association, and I am here to ask for your blessing to submit a grant proposal on the town's behalf. We have been talking with John and Joe over at the DPW about this for a few weeks. And basically, the application we want to put in would be submitted to something called the Coastal Pollution Remediation Grant Program, which is run by the Office of Coastal Zone Management. As you might imagine, it's aimed at pollution. In this case, we're talking particularly about stormwater runoff pollution associated with roadways. This is kind of the forte of this particular grant program. And what we would like to do with this funding is spend some time doing some water quality monitoring and assessment of stormwater pollution along Unquity Brook, which is one of the tributaries of the Neponset River in Milton. Unquity Brook starts actually as a tiny little trickle behind the hospital and kind of sneaks back behind Milton Academy, makes its way through the cemetery, under Brook Road, down Adams Street, and actually ends up down by East Squantum Street, where it comes out into the marsh and actually becomes Gulliver's Creek in the saltwater portion of it. It's a significant brook from our point of view as a conservation group because it's an area where we have spawning of rainbow smelt, which are an anadromous fish that lives out in the ocean, comes upstream to spawn. There's really two places in the Neponset watershed where they spawn, this tiny little creek, and then over on the main stem just below the Baker Dam. It's an area where the town has actually made a fair amount of progress in improving water quality over the years. The upgrades to the Libby Road pump station a few years ago were a big benefit to the system, as well as a few other sewer-related problems that have been found and fixed over the years. But our water quality monitoring data shows that this stream is still a significant problem area within the town. It has high bacteria levels, high sedimentation of silt and dirt getting into the stream, which is particularly a problem for the fish, as well as issues with nutrient pollution, fertilizer runoff. So the focus of the grant would be to basically try to do some surveys of the brook, see if we can figure out where the problems are coming from, do some very preliminary work to try to identify some possible areas to improve the situation and see where things go from there. If the grant application is successful, the work would happen between January and June 30th of 2015. The town would actually be 2016. That'd be pretty impressive if we did it retroactively. The town would be the grantee. Most of the work would actually be done by the Watershed Association. The total amount of the project cost would be about $25,000, of which we're proposing that about $1,200 would be in the form of in-kind staff time on the part of the DPW, which would be about 20 hours of staff time over the 6-month grant. The Watershed Association would put up $5,000 to cover the cost of the lab work, and then the grant itself would cover about $19,000. So that all works out to about $25,000. And I don't know if you have questions or comments. We do have, the one thing I will tell you is there was a little summary of this that went around in your packet in advance. There is a, I believe they call it a commitment letter that they would want to have from the town. And I've taken the liberty of putting together a sample of what that would look like for this grant proposal that I can leave with you as well.
Okay, great.
So logistically, the reason why I'm sitting here is that under the underwriting requirements of this grant under coastal zone management is public entities, state governments and local governments have to be the applicant. The watershed associations cannot be. So, we're principally the lead applicant in the associations carrying out the work for us. This is yet again another partnership that we've fostered over the past 10 or 15 years, solidly. In promoting our stormwater initiatives, which is something we want to continue to do here. The in-kind service is really mostly technical research with regards to the discharge points of those storm systems and maybe some correlation to storage data, depending on the results we find. So it's something, it doesn't result in any particular concern for mandate in the future for us and doing things. It just helps us study and better understand. Good portion of this watershed is runoff coming from the expressway itself, which picks up the expressway runoff as well as Granite Avenue State
As it gets near
portion.
the Gulf of Creeks part of it.
Right, and it connects down in at Squantum Street down near California. So it's a great area, it's a vulnerable area, it's a great program to help us address it, and something we support. The last piece of logistics is the grant application is due this Friday, the 4th. So the draft letterhead is signed by Anne Marie, so I think if this board were to take a vote to authorize a signatory on behalf of the town, it would probably be Michael as a designee, because we have to have this in paperwork complete. We can get that to you tomorrow, and then you can submit it on Friday.
And so, just for clarification, it's not the application, you're looking for us to support the commitment letter? Are they, or both?
Commitment letter and the application are both
Yeah.
due, right?
Okay.
They are both due, and really, I think the thing that the board needs to sign off on is this commitment letter, which basically just says, yes, we would like to do this, we understand that there's a match commitment, and this is how we expect to meet it, and we understand that the work has to be done by June 30th, 2016. Thank you very much, is basically what it says.
So it's a competitive grant.
Yep.
So it'll go through a review process. When an award is made, it would culminate in an award contract with the community. And at that point, we'll be coming back and looking for an additional vote to accept the grant monies, at which point we will vote the terms of the contract when that happens. And we're confident it will happen.
Yes.
We've been pretty successful in getting grants in the past, due to Ian's hard work.
I mean, it certainly seems like a worthwhile.
It does.
Definitely, yeah.
So we do have a motion here to,
I'll make a motion to approve an application for a coastal pollutant remediation grant and authorize the town administrator to sign and execute any pertinent documents on behalf of the Board of Selectmen.
friendly amendment, do we change town administrator to
Assistant town administrator.
Second.
Okay, motion made second. Any further comments? Seeing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Let's see, we have item 12 is a discussion of Well, why don't we get item 13 out of the way first, because that's a real quickie, and just get it over with, which is the approval of a one-day liquor license for St. Pius X.
I'll move that we approve a one-day liquor license for St. Pius X for a fundraiser to be held on Saturday, September 19th, 2015, at 101 Walcott Road from 6:30 to 11 p.m.
And I'll second that.
Motion made, second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, item 12 is a discussion of the Board of Selectmen goals and objectives. And we have a draft of those goals and objectives. I have read through it. I think they're all great. Does anybody want to comment on them, or how do we want to?
I guess it's just one question really raised by Anne Marie, and David, this was from your list. So on the first one, which is the transition to the strong town administrator, the fourth bullet point, there's a sub-bullet point under it. It says town administrator to reestablish monthly department meetings and bi-monthly working group meetings to enhance internal communication for various reasons. And then it says an example would be a human service function group consisting of library, parks, health, and COA. So when this got circulated, Anne Marie called me and said, well, for a period of time, we didn't have department meetings. We've reinstated those. And she did mention the court team meetings, but it sounds like so her question really was whether we should delete this one or revise it, but it's, to both of us, it sounds like you might be talking about something a little different than just the court team meeting.
What I was mentioning, and the core team meetings are great, but
Yeah.
what I was looking to do is if, in our transition to a strong town administrator, we'd be looking at consolidating in some capacity and trying to maximize what we have. And that's one of the examples, and one of the examples where I worked in my past, where it was very efficient. It's a human service group where it's to non-duplicate activities and to share information on a regular basis. I think taxpayers often see with these groups, library, parks, health, and the Council on Aging, a lot of benefit. And I think that it enables us to have a working relationship with department heads who talk on a regular basis to basically maximize all that we do and also uncover what we don't do, to ensure that we're doing it for whether it be seniors, whether it be young children, whether it be students who go to the library, and also various health initiatives. So it's just another option to
You're right,
discuss.
and all those human services are kind of interrelated in one respect or another, so that there
Yeah.
probably are ways to.
Should we take out, and just have it worded TA to
Maybe
hold
establish.
monthly or establish bi-monthly working group meetings, and just take out reestablish monthly department meetings?
That makes sense
Sounds
to
like
me.
that might be something different than.
That makes
Yeah.
sense to me, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. And the rest of those are all things we've talked about, and I totally agree with.
So how is this going to work? These are the board's goals. Well, eventually you need to talk with the town administrator when she's back at some point about her goals for the year.
Yes.
And
And
maybe
then-
distilling this down, or formulating goals for her off of this list.
Yeah,
These are bigger policy
and
goals.
basically, these are our goals, but in order to implement our goals, it's gonna take the cooperation of the town administrator and department heads and everybody else.
I think by working with both hers and ours, creating an action plan,
Yep.
as we do get into this transition of a strong town administrator, because a lot of that will take shape, naturally, I think,
Yeah.
by virtue of some of these items.
Mhm. I totally agree.
I think it's pretty clear that, and I think we all agree that we want to see basic town services increase, constituent services. People have a better connect to government. And I think that, we all share some of these same goals.
Yep.
And I think that our town administrator, Anne Marie, does as well. And I think she's been working really hard internally with her staff, just to a lot of success, to great success, on implementation. And I think that over some time, you know, I know our goal is to continue to meet with neighborhood associations and really create some sort of a better line of communication, so that residents do get information clearer and quicker.
Absolutely. Yes, I think you're right. I think the next step would be to get the town administrator's goals and see to what extent those dovetail with our goals and objectives, and then, yeah, they'll be developed. I mean, some of these aren't 1 year,
No, yeah.
but yeah, develop an implementation plan to, you know, bring it to the next level.
Yeah, I think you know, some of these are gonna take a few years. But I mean, when I look down at it, at a social media policy or a media policy, some of those things can
be done right away. Yeah.
away.
Mhm.
You know, so some of these things, I think if you look at it and prioritize it, you know, in working with the town administrator, we could probably come up with an action plan and a reasonable plan on what could be done on 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months.
Yep.
What could be done over the next couple of years.
Yep. Okay. Anything else? Okay, that being said, see, town administrator's report, our town administrator is not here today. Does our assistant town administrator have a report?
I just wanted to announce to the public and as information gets out there that the Mass Department of Transportation will be holding a 25% design public hearing on the East Milton Deck project. That's going to be held on September 9th, which is a Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, right here at the Council on Aging. It's going to be an opportunity for the public to hear information on the proposed project, where things are at currently, and to express their views and comments on the proposal. A PowerPoint presentation will be available tomorrow on the Town of Milton's website, which will provide some additional information on the project and the hearing, so people can feel free to visit that website tomorrow. We should have that up.
Okay.
Great.
That being said, there's been you've kind of seen it out there, there may be a misconception as to whose project this actually is, and some requests that